penalty merchant, championship player? Let's have a little dive into the stats and see what they've got to say about it. Welcome, Blue Believers, to another episode of the Stamford Sync, where we are syncing up with everything Chelsea FC. Strikers. Man, the striker position at Chelsea has been not just a question, it's just been a nightmare, hasn't it? Since our last successful Premier League striker in Diego Costa, we have spent so much money trying to bring the right guy in to fill that number 9 spot and get us a hatful of goals. Blueco have been in tow for a couple of years now and haven't seemed particularly bothered about sorting the striker situation out until right now. We've got two young and exciting names that have just come in Liam Delap and Joao Pedro, and they both have one particular thing in common: Premier League experience. You know the last two strikers we bought with Premier League experience? Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang in 2022, and we all know how that went, and Olivier Giroud in 2018. Outside of that, all of the strikers that we've brought in have been from the likes of Germany or Spain, and have normally come away from good seasons there, but it always begs the question, doesn't it? Can that be translated to Premier League form? But this time we've got two young, hungry and ambitious strikers that have just signed for us, and for the first time in a really long time, the question isn't can they translate that to Premier League form, it's squarely just can they translate that to moving up a notch in a better team. So it's interesting, isn't it? We've seen both players play for us at the Club World Cup now, and we have a very small sample size of each. Liam Delap's got a goal and assist in about 3 games, and Joao Pedro just scored 2 unbelievable goals against Fluminense in the semi-final of the Club World Cup. But that is clearly not enough of a sample size to make any sort of comparison. So in today's video, we're going to have a look at Liam Delap and Joao Pedro, their performance in both their respective teams in Ipswich and Brighton in the Premier League last year. If you guys are enjoying the content and would like to see more, please do me the distinct honour of liking and sharing the video, or subscribe to the channel, or just roast me in the comments, whatever gets you through your day. Every single tiny little click you guys do means the world to me, and I am absolutely loving this YouTube journey so far. All of you that have got involved already are a bunch of absolute legends, and I can't thank you enough. But let's go, right? Let's get the Stamford Sync out there and to more people so we can get this thing rolling. Okay, so before I get deep into the stats about last season for each player, there are a couple of nuanced set of things to understand about both players before we just arbitrarily start comparing them. So we'll start with Liam Delap. Liam Delap played for a now relegated Ipswich side. They finished 19th in the Premier League, and in these comparison videos, the question always begs, yeah, well, what can he do in a team with better players around him? And also there's the type of player that Liam Delap is compared to the type of player that Joao Pedro is. Liam Delap is a archetypal number 9, and that might be largely to do with how Ipswich played. Maybe Liam Delap's got a bit more to offer in that respect if coached properly by Maresca, but from his debut season with Ipswich in the Premier League, he played as that archetypal number 9, and a lot of their attacking play was funneled directly to him. He wasn't really expected to drop in and connect play together and get involved with build-up, although his link-up play isn't bad. But I think it's just important to assert from the off that even though we are going to get into the stats, the team that he's come from and the type of player that he is very different to Joao Pedro. And the aim of this video is to try and figure out who do we think will function better in our team. So let's talk a little bit about Joao Pedro. Joao Pedro's had a couple of seasons in the Premier League now and has got that little bit more experience than Liam Delap, despite there only being 1 year difference between their ages. The other really important thing, which I will bring up my first little graphic for, is Joao Pedro is a much more versatile player than Liam Delap. Liam Delap was played as the number 9, and that was it. That is his role. He is a striker. You're not really expecting him to do anything else. But as you can see in this little graphic here, although Joao Pedro did spend most of his time playing in a centre-forward position, with in and around 70% of his minutes coming from there, he also spent time playing as a second striker, a centre-attacking midfielder, and occasionally a left winger. Now, this one was actually news to me, I'll be completely honest. When we bought Joao Pedro, I kind of assumed we'd bought him in to be a left winger, and to more so compete with Jamie Gittins for that position, rather than with Liam Delap for the striker role. But based on what we've seen from the Club World Cup so far, and these stats in particular, they kind of denote that Joao Pedro is here to fight for that number 9 spot. And maybe we can put him out on the left sometimes, so there is potential for both of these players to play together, but despite my earlier thoughts that maybe we were bringing him in as a left winger, that seems to not be the case at all. Okay, so now just before we get into the stats, let's take a little look at both of their respective heat maps for the Premier League season last year. And we will start with Liam Delap. So a couple of interesting things to note here. The first thing being that although I wouldn't say he's drifting out wide, he does seem to favour that left side and try and create chaos and generally direct his play through that left channel. And when it comes to his defensive work, he also seems to come over to that left side quite a lot to get involved. And speaking of his defensive work, interestingly, you can see see quite a lot of little spots there rooted quite firmly in the penalty box area, right? Now that's obviously because he's kind of a big guy, and with the height on him, he's obviously being tasked with trying to get ahead on and make clearances when there's corners and free kicks coming in. Although there's no red there, that is interesting that almost all of his heat map in that final bit of that defensive third is rooted right in that penalty box. So the other thing this tells us is he's not exactly a fox in the box either. Now this has probably got something to do with the way that Ipswich played. For one reason or another, maybe because of the team around him, Liam Delap didn't maybe get to spend as much time in that penalty box as he would have liked to. So now let's move on to Joao Pedro, and there is a stark contrast here. So the first thing that is super obvious from this is Joao Pedro is a very versatile player. But do bear in mind that 70% of this heat map is based on him playing as a centre forward. So all those red spots on the left, that's where he is when he's playing as a striker as well. And we have seen a little bit of that in the Club World Cup so far. Joao Pedro likes to drop deep or get out wide and facilitate play as much as he is very keen to get in the box and try and score goals. Another thing you can see here compared to Liam Delap's heat map is he spent a lot more time in that penalty area than Liam Delap did. Now that might be something associated with, for instance, Brighton under Hertzler played a more progressive possession style football and he had better players around him at the end of the day. Brighton finished 8th in the Premier League, which is a really, really good finish for them. So it's not exactly apples and oranges, right? But there is obviously a big difference in how their teams performed, which might dictate a lot of the way that these stats go. But on the face of it, Joao Pedro's heat map tells you that he is looking to get involved in the play wherever he can, whereas Liam Delap, at least for Ipswich, was a much more focused player. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't necessarily see Maresca coming in and saying, right, Delap, I want you to drift out to the left. I want you to play as centre attacker. I want you to drop deep and facilitate play so Cole Palmer can get forward. You got to call a spade, right? And in that respect, I think Liam Delap will generally remain to be an archetypal number 9, but maybe more emphasis will be put on link-up play and maybe trying to facilitate some of the other players around him to get into more attacking roles, but it's certainly not his bread and butter. So like I said, Ipswich finished 19th and Brighton finished 8th. So there is a huge difference in how their teams performed, and the styles were very different as well. Ipswich were more dogged and defensive, where Brighton definitely tried to open up play a bit more and get on the front foot and be a bit more progressive. So I'll tell you now, we're not going to be able to definitively say one is better than the other in this video, but I do just think it's really interesting to compare their general play and start to look at what we can expect from each player. So let's get into their comparative stats for the 2024-2025 Premier League season. I've gotten all of these stats from SofaScore and compiled what I think are generally the most important ones into a table so we can have a look. And first up, we've got appearances. So overall, Liam Delap featured 37 times in the Premier League last season, with 32 of those being starts and 5 being bench appearances. And comparatively, that's a lot more than Joao Pedro made, with 27 overall appearances and 25 starts. And it's quite easy to see that number represented in the next stat, which is minutes played. Liam Delap featured nearly 700 more minutes in the Premier League last season than Joao Pedro did. So another interesting nuance to the situation. So Liam Delap spent a lot more time on the pitch honing his role than Joao Pedro did for Brighton last season. And that kind of makes it interesting when we come into the next stat, which is goals scored. So Liam Delap scored 12 goals in the Premier League last season. And before we say anything else, that is unbelievable for a 21-year-old striker who's just come up from the Championship in ostensibly one of the worst teams in the league. And the fact that only 2 of those are penalties means 10 goals from open play is really, really impressive. So then we move on to Joao Pedro's goal return, which was 10, which is amazing, right? 10 goals in a season is a really, really good return. But the nuance of that is 5 of those were penalties. So 5 goals from open play instantly doesn't sound quite as impressive as 10 goals from Liam Delap in what was a much more struggling team. This has led to a lot of calls from fans that Joao Pedro is a penalty merchant and doesn't really offer anything else. Now, I don't actually agree with that, but you can't ignore the statistics, right? So there is something interesting about the penalty side of it as well. So Liam Delap only scored 2 penalties and won 1 of those himself, while of the 3 penalties that Joao Pedro scored, he actually won 3 of them himself. So there's another stat that we'll get into later that backs this up, but what that instantly tells you is Joao Pedro is making much more of a nuisance of himself than Liam Delap is. And it's not just easy to score a penalty. It's such a massive moment, a massive occasion, and can often be the turning point in a game. There's so much pressure and you need to be calm, have good technique, try and throw the keeper off and put him the other way. It's not just as simple as kicking the ball into the net. But just looking at goal return, it's easy to say that Liam Delap had a better season. The other slightly nuanced part of that is, as I mentioned before, Liam Delap was the focal point of his team. He scored over half the goals that Ipswich managed in the entire season. So it's clear that they were putting almost all of their attacking play through him, which would lead you to expect that he'd get more goals from it. Joao Pedro, on the other hand, was tasked with lots of different roles. And as you'll see from the next stat that we'll get into, is definitely a more capable facilitator, which you would have to say is probably the kind of thing that Enzo Maresca wants in his team. So let's get on to assists. Liam Delap managed 2 assists last season, which isn't terrible for that archetypal number 9 in a relegated Ipswich team. But it does tell you that their play was probably not being funneled through him in that way, and he was mostly trying to arrive at the end of these key passes and assists in order to score the goals. Now, Joao Pedro managed 6 assists last season, and that's wicked. As I said, he spent 70% of all of his time playing as a striker, and that shows you that as a striker, he's also looking to drop deep and drift wide and facilitate other players. And when you've got players in your team like Cole Palmer, who can score from anywhere, and Enzo Fernandez, who is quickly improving his ability to arrive late in the box and score a goal, a striker that can drop deep and facilitate as well as score goals is almost exactly what Enzo Maresca is looking for right now. So one really good thing about both players is that both of them outperformed their XG. Now, I know not everyone's into XG, right? But I am always going to feature this stat in these comparisons because whether you buy it or not, there is a lot of information out there to tell you that if players outperform their XG, then they normally perform really well in general. So the fact that we've got these two very young strikers that both outperformed their XG last season is a great sign. So they actually both outperformed their expected assists as well, which is cool. It's good. I guess it's more impressive for Joao Pedro than it is for Liam Delap because, like I say, Liam Delap was not really being expected to make all of these assists because he was generally expected to be on the end of all of these attacks for Ipswich. But Joao Pedro outperforming his assists by double is awesome. Now we're going to move into the shot stats, and this is where things start to get really interesting. Now, obviously, this has to be broken against the fact that Liam Delap featured a lot more, and as I've said a few times, was obviously the focal point of his team. So Liam Delap managed a total of 66 shots in the Premier League last season, with 29 of those being on target, giving him a 43.9% shot accuracy. Now, this is kind of outside of the team he was playing in and whatever. This was Liam Delap getting chances to take shots and what he did with them. So this is definitely a more isolated stat than a lot of the rest of these other ones are. Now, this is where Joao Pedro's return starts to look really impressive. So Joao Pedro took half of the shots that Liam Delap did last season at 33, but 20 of them were on target, giving him a shot accuracy of 60%. And to have played less minutes and had half of the shots, but to be that much more accurate, that's really impressive. So it's weird, going into this, I probably would have assumed that the clinical one of the two was going to be Liam Delap, but if the stats are to be believed, Joao Pedro is actually quite significantly in front of Liam Delap in that respect. And I guess makes him more in line to be getting the earlier starts next season, and Liam Delap might have to push his way into the team if that's what's going to happen. Now, the next stat pertains a little bit to the heat maps that I talked about before and just kind of reinforces what we've already talked about. Touches in the opposition box. Liam Delap only managed 67 touches in the opposition box last season, and this is probably one that can be attributed to the side that he was playing for. Like I said, the majority of the red in Liam Delap's heat map was actually just in front of the penalty area box. So that kind of means he was hanging around there waiting for someone to make that pass or someone to make something happen so he could run onto it, all probably playing with his back to goal, but he didn't manage to spend much time in the opposition box. By comparison, Joao Pedro spent a lot of time in the opposition box, with 174 touches in the opposition box last season in 10 less games and 700 less minutes. There definitely seems to be a theme developing already, doesn't there? Joao Pedro's versatility of being able to drop deep and drifting out wide hasn't hurt his ability to also drive into that box and try and score and make things happen. Pass completion, I guess, is a bit of a misnomer because it is kind of as to be expected. Liam Delap, as an archetypal number 9, is not really expected to connect play together and pass a lot, and he managed a pass completion of 61.3%. And by comparison, Joao Pedro at 74.7% just makes a lot more sense because he's dropping deep and he's drifting out wide and he's trying to facilitate, and he's that kind of player. I saw a really interesting line about Joao Pedro basically saying that he's a number 9 that thinks like a number 10. So I'm not getting into that 9.5 Joshua Zirkzee sort of thing, but we've had a few players like this before in the likes of Timo Werner, Kai Havertz, more recently Christopher Nkunku, but none of them have actually managed to make that work, and they always just seem like they're stuck in between the roles rather than be able to play both of them. Based on what we've seen so far, even just from his brief cameos in the Club World Cup, Joao Pedro is a striker who is able to drop deep and play like a number 10. He seems to be trying to get the best out of both roles rather than being stuck in the middle of them, where some of our other players we've bought for similar reasons have been stuck. Timo Werner was not a good striker and not a good left winger. Christopher Nkunku is an excellent finisher, but as far as connective play goes, he never managed to cement himself as a striker, a left winger, or a centre attacking midfielder. Joao Pedro looks like he might be able to start in the number 9 role and play all of these other roles as well, which, like I said before, is going to be amazing for facilitating players like Cole Palmer and Enzo Fernandez to arrive late in the box and score goals. So just before we get into the disciplinary stuff, we've got one interesting stat that I want to talk about, and that is fouls won. Now, you remember back in the day we had had Eden Hazard, and he was like the most fouled player in the league, like season after season. And ultimately that leads to the team getting a lot of chances. And even if he doesn't get on the end of those chances himself, it's still facilitating opportunities for the other players. So Liam Delap won 22 fouls last season, which is potentially 22 opportunities to take a free kick or get a penalty or something like that, which is all right, but that probably makes sense that figure's quite low, seeing as he didn't actually manage to get into that penalty box very often last season. And by comparison again, Joao Pedro, in 10 less games and 700 less minutes, but yes, for a better side, won 45 fouls last season, which is over double what Liam Delap managed. And like I said, that tells you on top of everything else, Joao Pedro is making a nuisance of himself and being chaotic and looking for any opportunity to get a chance for his team. Now let's get into the discipline stuff. So Liam Delap seems to be quite a fiery player. He was actually a bit disappointing in his last game against Palmeiras. He wasn't really managing to get involved in the play, and he was obviously getting frustrated, and he started doing silly things like pushing players around, arguing with the ref, making rash challenges, and it was slightly unbecoming if I'm completely honest. I love a bit of fire and I love a bit of passion, but you've got to channel that positively, and you can't just lose your rag and start pushing people. It's just not going to work. So yeah, Liam Delap got 12 yellow cards in the Premier League last season, and that kind of backs up what we've already seen from him. Unfortunately, in the Club World Cup, that actually meant he missed our last game, but it wasn't necessarily unfortunate because it gave Joao Pedro an opportunity to come in and score 2 phenomenal goals. In comparison, Joao Pedro only got 4 yellow cards last season. Now this is another one, isn't it, where maybe that number's been inflated by the fact that Liam Delap is the focal point of his team, he's where all the attacks are going to, and in general, centre-backs are going into games against Ipswich being like, we are going to rile up Liam Delap. Whereas Joao Pedro, because he drops deep and facilitates and he kind of moves all over the place, maybe there's a bit less focus on him because he's not always obviously going to be the guy that they need to be worried about scoring goals. And it is interesting because although he got lots of yellows, Liam Delap didn't get any red cards last season, so he managed to keep a lid on it for the whole season. Whereas Joao Pedro did get a straight red card in one of his games, which obviously that meant a 3-match ban, and he did lose it in that moment. I don't even think there's necessarily too much statistically you can look into that with. Ultimately, both of the players have something in their discipline that needs looking at. Liam Delap overall needs to kind of draw it back, but he's never seemed to have reached that spot where he's broken and something crazy's happened. Whereas while Joao Pedro is kind of the opposite of that, where 4 yellow cards in the season is actually really respectable, but as we're seeing with Nicholas Jackson at the moment, you can't be a striker and be getting straight red cards. Absolutely not. So I'm sure that's something Maresca will be paying attention to, being that Jackson has caused us so many issues with these red cards, and that's something we're going to want to avoid in the future. So that is kind of it. Those are the side-by-side stats in comparison with each other, but what do they really tell us? While I've been really excited about Liam Delap, what that is starting to tell me is I think that Liam Delap is more likely to be the backup option, at least to begin with. What Liam Delap does do is offer us a completely different kind of player. Maresca will be really appreciative of being able to be like, oh, I need something different here. I do have a completely different option when he wants to try something and when things aren't going our way. And I do think that Liam Delap could play his way into that thinking, right? I mean, you've only got to look at the goal scoring stats to say Liam Delap knows where the back of the net is. But bearing in mind, we've used Jackson so much in the last season, and in other times, the likes of Pedro Neto and Cole Palmer have been put in a false 9 position as well. It seems clear that Maresca favours a striker option who offers a lot more to the team. And that's kind of the story of Maresca's teams in general, isn't it? You've only got to look at the way he treats fullbacks to see Maresca doesn't look at a player and say, you are this position. Maresca looks at a player and says, you are going to start in this position, but I want you to offer me this, 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 and this. So yeah, that is kind of what I think about this at the moment. And it feels like I'm favouring Joao Pedro as our starting striker right now. And right now is based on the stats, what we've seen so far, and also based on the kind of football I've seen us play and the type of strikers that Maresca seems to favour. But I am absolutely not writing Liam Delap off, because what he did in an Ipswich side last season is incredible. He's still a really, really young player, and it'll be interesting to see if Maresca does try to do something with him other than just having him as that archetypal number 9. Are there more strings to the bow of Liam Delap that can unlock him as a complete player? I guess we will have to wait and see. Let me know what you think in the comments, guys. Who are you putting out for our first stretch of games in the Premier League next season as the number 9? Is it Liam Delap? Is it Joao Pedro? Is it Liam Delap up top with Joao Pedro on the left and Jamie Gittins has got to fight for that spot? I'd love to know what you think. Let's have a chat about it. I will keep my ear to the ground for more Chelsea news, and soon I will obviously be releasing my preview for the upcoming final, whether that be against PSG or Real Madrid. The match is tonight, so we will find out shortly. Nice one, guys. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. I hope you're having a wicked day, and I will catch up with you very soon. Peace.